What is the better movement for both zero builds and build mode in Chapter 4 Season 2? Is it the Kinetic Blade, aka the sword, or is it the ODM Gear from Attack on Titan? Well, it's not a one-way ticket answer, so make sure you watch this entire video in order to find out the results for both game modes. Movement is a necessity in zero build mode, but not so much for build mode of Fortnite. So if you're ever playing zero builds, carrying any movement is preferable to carrying the better movement or waiting for your preferred item. But what if you find both the Kinetic Blade and the ODM Gear? Which one is better? Well, to know this, we need to look at some variables. Now, talking about the ODM Gear. ODM Gear might seem underwhelming at first, but after using it a relative amount, you'll notice it is not only very fun, but it could also be considered overpowered. The ODM Gear has limited durability, and this is the worst negative net factor for it. Since it has both mobility and melee attacks, we need to take this into account. And considering the Kinetic Blade also has melee attacks, we also have to consider it for that item. The melee attack for the ODM Gear can be devastating, and if you don't have movement yourself, it might seem impossible to run away from being attacked by it, and before you know it, you would have lost 70 damage 3 times for a total of 210 damage. Now this melee attack is 10 times better than the Kinetic Blade's melee attack in almost all circumstances. However, when you use the melee attack for the ODM Gear, it greatly depletes the durability of it, which ties into its worst negative net factor, which I talked about before, its limited durability. It doesn't last forever. Another side note to note for the ODM Gear, you can also slide while using this item for a period of time while swinging and using it for a movement item, and then you can jump back into your swing with no issues. Some other variables to note about the ODM Gear as well as zero build notes are the following. The ODM Gear works just like the Spider-Man Mythic and the grappler gloves. It can cause you to take fall damage if you get shot mid-air while using it and you're too high up. Not to mention, while you get shot while using it, it instantly puts the item on the cooldown, the other worst factor about this item. So if you're using it and you get shot, then you'll instantly be stuck out in the middle of the open. If you have no other movement items, you have to wait till your cooldown refreshes before you can move again. This can leave you in a wide open field with no cover, easy for people to shoot at you, or easy for you to get third party by other people shooting at you. Now say if we remove the factor of the devastating melee attack, it seems like this item's all net negatives. You can get shot, take fall damage, it automatically has the cooldown can last for a long amount of time. On top of that as well, limited durability. So is this item just the worst item overall? No, not necessarily. This item has better movement for speed and rotations. Mobility being more so moving you from point A to point B or moving around a fight, and rotations moving you around zone or helping you find more people to fight. This can get you from one side of the map to the other a lot faster than the Kinetic Blade ever can. So if you're going for high kill gameplay, you might prefer to carry this item. Its melee attack as well, on top of being something that can destroy players, can also destroy shield bubbles, bushes, and also buildings. The way that the cooldown works for this item is the length of the cooldown varies. It's not a single static number. The more you use this item, you'll notice in the middle of the screen near your reticle, there's a white bar that depletes. The more this bar depletes, the longer the cooldown. If the white bar depletes all the way, you'll be put on an automatic cooldown. But this takes ages in order for it to get to this state, so I wouldn't be too worried about using it if you're just using this for basic rotation. So the less you use this item, the less cooldown it has. But the more you use it and the more melee attacks, the longer cooldown, which is kind of similar to the way the Pathfinder's grappler works in Apex Legends. Distance is taken into account for the next time that you can use it, aka the cooldown. Something else that's important to note, you can't pull out a gun while using this item until you land and hit the ground again. When it comes to build mode, the ODM Gear has these things you want to note about it. You can pull out builds while using this item. So if you swing on top of someone's builds, you can then pull out your own walls and stuff and build a little bit above it so they don't have all piece control where you've just landed. On top of that as well, in build mode of Fortnite, you can one-shot people with this item. Considering it can do 70 damage 3 times, a total of 210, that's someone's entire health in build mode, which can make it super OP. It can also break builds and boxes that people were using in build mode, so you can exploit into them, which makes it a great offensive item. But I wouldn't recommend using this item while you're inside your own box. It doesn't really work well like that. Do note, before we review what's better for each mode, we have to talk about the Kinetic Blade. The more you know, the smarter player you'll become, and the more game sense you can gain, and the more fights you'll win. So when it comes to the Kinetic Blade, it has two rarities. The blue Kinetic Blade / sword, aka the rare version of it, is the most common spawning version of this item since it was released with the Attack on Titan update. It has 2 dashes, unlike its predecessor, the epic version. But it's the best thing about this movement item. The attack isn't great for it, and it doesn't do high damage. It leaves you out in the open, and you're very vulnerable while doing it because you'll be pausing for a few seconds in between. Especially considering that this attack is very easy to misclick on KBM, this is probably the worst thing about this item. Unfortunately, you can't upgrade the rare / blue version of it at an upgrade station to an epic / purple version. The epic / purple version has 3 dashes. It still exists, but it's more rare. You can get this item guaranteed from NPCs selling it, from dueling NPCs as well as from holo chests. The dash cooldown for both these rarities is 10 seconds. And since it has a timer on it, it's easier to use because when you use ODM Mythic, it just has a bar that's slowly moving and you can't really determine when's the best time or when the next time you're going to be able to use it. Also as well, because this item has infinite cooldowns, plus you can't take fall damage while using it, it is better to use in zero build mode. Using only one dash for rotations, okay, getting around the map and saving 1 to 2 dashes depending on which rarity you have for the items, for movement after a fight or to reposition in a fight, so 1 to move around the map, and then saving those 2 additional dashes to get away from people or right after a kill to move into a bush or behind a tree where you can heal. It's easy to recognize once you account those 2 factors, this item's better for zero build mode. I think you might see where I'm going with this. The sword is better for zero build mode. Due to not getting stranded while getting shot while using it, and its infinite amount of uses, it is more predictable and reliable, and less like an item and more similar to a mechanic like sprinting in the game. The ODM gear is better for build mode. You don't need movement in build mode. You can just simply box up if you get shot at. Plus, being able to do 200 damage to someone in build mode who's just out in the open and unaware that you're there means that this item is super OP in build mode. Just be careful not to swing too high and take fall damage. Plus, you can have better rotations around the whole map and faster ones in build mode with this item. Now, this doesn't count comp in any sense. If you're playing arena and you're in late game, the sword is better overall because you need movement for that. If you don't have a sword, you're going to be at a loss pretty much for competitive game modes. It's also important to note there's a leaked legendary or mythic version of this sword coming to the game in the future, which has been added to the files, but we're unsure whether this is going to be creative only, but just keep your eyes out for it. It might be a better option. So, in summary, ODM gear is better for movement around the entire map, but it can leave you stranded if you get hit. But when it comes to the sword is more reliable and methodical. Thank you so much for watching the video. Subscribe to help me reach 10k before the season ends, and always remember to take care of yourselves. Bye.